You know when you have those like fireworks box things that shoot a lot of fireworks in rapid succession? I don't know what they're called, but they shoot a firework, then make a quick pause, then shoot another one, and then pause, and rinse and repeat a bunch. And every time you set one off, they shoot like a bunch of these patches of fireworks for a while, and then stop. At that point, you go like, oh, it's over, get up, go grab another firework, and then boom, a giant one pops out, and you're like, what? That's wild. That is the Survivors of the Void DLC right now. And I love it. As you may have seen in my previous video, I'm a little excited for the Survivors of the Void DLC. Just a little. In fact, this is probably the most collective hype I've ever seen for anything in Risk of Rain 2 ever. I mean, everyone is excited. You're excited, I'm excited, you're excited again, everyone's excited, and Hobo Games just keeps adding to the fire, like my gosh. It feels like every dev thoughts, every tweet, every Discord announcement has some big reveal about the DLC. And just when you think like, okay, there's no way there's more big stuff coming in the DLC, well bam, there's just another big thing to reveal about the DLC. I mean, the DLC just has so much awesome stuff coming with it that's been revealed. Enough so that this is most definitely the most anticipation I've ever felt for Risk of Rain 2 and March 1st. That is, aside from National Pig Day. Because, I mean, it's National Pig Day. Can't really retract from that. So, with all that said, Survivors of the Void is looking to be pretty dang wild. But that begs the question, why so wild? How can this DLC really be the most anticipated thing ever in the history of Risk of Rain 2? Well, for several really good reasons. First off, we just got a reveal of the second survivor that will be in the Survivors of the Void, the Void Fiend. Which, while that means, rip Pug, you will live on our hearts forever, the Void Fiend is, well, you know, okay, I guess. The Void Fiend is a void-corrupted commando who looks just as cool as he is probably in constant pain. I'm sure he's fine. Void Fiend has some pretty interesting and unique mechanics about him, specifically surrounding his passive, Void Corruption. Unlike any other survivor, Void Fiend does not have any alternate abilities. He instead has alternate modes, Controlled and Corrupted, which you can switch between in-game, with all abilities for both unlocked from the get-go. His base form, as I like to call it, is Controlled, and the more healing he receives, the longer he stays in his controlled form, indicated by a percent meter on top of him. As long as this percent meter stays below 100, Fiend stays in his controlled form and has his controlled abilities. However, as he takes more damage, and slowly over time, Fiend builds up Corruption, which adds to his percent meter. Once that percent meter hits 100%, he enters his Corrupt form, which grants him a whole new slew of powerful alternate abilities. Once Corrupted form is activated, his percent meter starts rapidly decreasing from 100, giving you a small window of opportunity to use his corrupted abilities. However, once the meter hits 0, he returns to his controlled form, and the whole cycle starts over. This mechanic plays really interestingly with Fiend, and leads to some pretty awesome results with how his abilities function. So, on the note of abilities, let's talk about those. First off, we have his primary, Drown. In controlled form, this ability shoots a long-range slowing beam for 300% damage, a general good primary that, while a bit slow, definitely has some damage, plenty of range, and slows enemies. However, the corrupted counterpart to this ability is a little more interesting. Corrupted Drown shoots a literal mini Kamehameha for, well, carry the 2, divide by X, square that, and, a lot of damage. It literally is just a mini death laser beam, which is awesome, but also sort of opposite to his controlled primary. This primary contrast was super cool to me, as it really adds more depth to the primaries as opposed to, oh, this one is just better than this one. You can trade long-range damage in controlled form for short-range mega damage in corrupted form and vice versa, which is a fair trade-off, as each mode has their own combat advantage. While the corrupted Drown does deal more damage, I like that it's not explicitly better than the controlled Drown, as it loses the long-range capability of its counterpart. This is a kind of theme you'll find with Fiend. You constantly work with switching between controlled and corrupted forms as you play, and adjust your playstyle to these forms as you switch. It's kinda like Multi's special ability to swap between 2 primaries, but it's not an odd command button press switch, which is a pretty unique and interesting idea. Anyway, moving on to his secondary, Void Fiend has the Flood ability. This ability is a small talking jetpack that shoots water in various forms from controlled nozzles, which, and that is not the right flug, hang on, wrong script. Fiend's Controlled Flood is a 600% damage plasma missile that when held, fires a 1100 plasma explosive ball instead of a missile. Fiend's corrupted form takes that and jacks it up a notch, eliminating the plasma beam entirely and making the 1100% plasma ball fire instantly, while also giving it twice the explosion radius. Now again, like Drown, the corrupted flood definitely has more raw strength than the controlled, but you do again have an advantage to using the controlled form of flood, in this case being that you get to use that plasma missile that isn't usable in corrupted form. So there is still that element of working with the different forms in different situations, as a mode change makes a fair-ish trade-off that doesn't leave one mode completely useless compared to the other, even if Corrupted Flood is a tad bit lot stronger than Controlled Flood in terms of DPS. And on to Fiend's utility, Trespass. In controlled form, this utility is kinda like Strides of Heresy, in that you disappear into the void and become intangible for the duration of the ability. However, instead of healing you like Strides, Trespass cleanses all debuffs once you enter it, and you move in a vertical upward arc. In corrupted form, Trespass turns into a faster forward teleport, allowing you to aggressively approach enemies at a quick speed. This ability is a lot more in line with the neither is really better than the other mechanic, which I like, because while Corrupted Trespass moves you faster and closer to enemies in front of you, Controlled Trespass gives you some nice vertical distance, which can be used tactically in situations that Corrupted Trespass can't. The Corrupted Trespass also pairs well with Corrupted Drown, as you need to be close to enemies to hit them with a limited range of the attack, while the Controlled Drown can be fired at a long distance, so Controlled Trespass gives you some vertical mobility that you can use to find a vantage point. It's like both are good, and it's up to you to utilize them both effectively, and I again really like that tactical choice element that comes with that. Moving on to the final ability, we have Void Fiend's special, Suppress. This is by far the most interesting addition to his kit, as it plays very heavily into his overall mechanic of switching forms. In controlled form, Suppress allows you to remove 25% corruption to heal yourself for 25% health. In corrupted form, however, Suppress allows you to remove 25% of your health to gain an additional 25% more corruption. This is super vital to his overall kits, and a big reason as to why his mode switching trait works so well. This special gives you the option to choose when you want to stay in controlled form or switch to corrupted, or vice versa. It's not like the forms are completely out of your control, and while you can't switch on a dime, you can influence the switch. This adds a whole realm of strategy to Fiend, as you can actually choose when you want to enter corrupted or controlled form at the cost of sacrificing corruption or health. This really opens a lot of doors as to how this survivor can be played, because, as I said before, his controlled and corrupted abilities have their own strengths and weaknesses. So with Suppress, you can situationally choose when you want to use certain abilities based on the situation at hand. If you have a ton of close range enemies and enough health, you might want to sacrifice some health to switch to corrupted form faster to clear them out with Corrupted Drown. However, while in controlled form, if you are being overwhelmed by enemies and are running low on health, perhaps you might want to sacrifice corruption for that extra health, and to gain the vertical distance that the controlled trespass ability gives, which could get you out of harm's way more easily than corrupted trespass. This option to influence what form you're in is just the icing on the cake for Fiend to me, as while his form switch is cool in and of itself, the fact that you have the option to tactically manipulate form switching adds a lot of depth to Fiend, which I just love. Sure, Fiend would have been good without his special, but that extra layer of control that comes with his special makes Fiend so much more interesting to me, and I am super excited to try him out in the upcoming DLC, and he is definitely a reason as to why I think this DLC is gonna be very, very wild. Along with a great survivor for both PC and console, the DLC also has something absolutely huge for console specifically, something that I think a lot of people are overlooking. In the Dev Thoughts 24 last December, Hopo Games announced that they are going to be releasing an update to console with the release of the Survivors of the Void DLC that will, and I quote, completely rebuild the console version of Risk of Rain 2 from the ground up. This is actually like a really big deal for console players of Risk of Rain 2, and even a semi-significant thing for Risk of Rain 2 on PC. As many console players may know, Hopo Games has had a nasty habit of making Risk of Rain 2 on console, to put it kindly, bad. Now, of course, it's a lot more than, oh, Hopo Games is evil and they are screwing console over, but I think it can be said that they have let consoles slip on the quality side. Enough so that I have made an alarmingly high number of videos about the state of Risk of Rain 2 on console, and I definitely would have made more if not for this upcoming DLC. Now, obviously, console players probably know what I'm talking about when I say console has some bad quality compared to PC. But for PC players who don't know what I'm talking about, just imagine playing Risk of Rain 2 like normal, but with your hands tied behind your back while set on fire and then waterboarded, and you'll get close to the console experience. Simplified, the problem with console is it's always been, and still as of this recording, is buggy. I'm talking over a full page of significant bugs at one point. Numerous attempts to fix this and updates have been made, but still, to this day as of recording, console is pretty bugged. Fire Elite trails are like Ghost Rider's Hellfire. Knockback is so bad that a single touch sends anything to the stratosphere, and Captain's Taser is still buggy on Switch, and yes, I'm stuck on that like 5 months later. I am not letting that go because Captain's M1 rocks and I want more reason to play him on Switch, but the Taser isn't helping. While it's not, like, totally unplayable, it's pretty obvious that console really needs some work to make it more, well, playable compared to PC. And added onto that, Hobo Games has also had another nasty habit of kinda sweeping all that console business under the rug. Console bugs? What? No, it's fine. There. All better. Updates to fix console bugs took weeks or even months to release after problems had been found. Some updates that were meant to fix problems made even more problems, some updates didn't solve any of the problems they were supposed to in the first place, and a lot of the time, all Hobo Games did to keep console players in the loop about console issues and how they were handling them was to give a tweet every once in a while with the equivalent of a sad face and a pat on the shoulder. Now, credit where credit is due. Hobo Games was definitely working with their team at Gearbox to get console fixed. However, the speed at which they did so, the time allotted to that, the quality of the fixes, and the amount of communication Hobo Games gave about said console fixes was, well, you guessed it, not good. However, that all changes with the Survivors of the Void. Just when the brink of utter console collapse was upon us mortal souls, Hobo Games burst from the depths and blessed us with what looks like the final solution to the console conundrum. The new console rebuild update coming with the DLC. Essentially, this update will bring with it a completely rebuilt version of Risk of Rain 2 on console that will both clear out pre-existing console-specific bugs and, more importantly, make the console version have much closer parity to the PC version of Risk of Rain 2, essentially making them connected in a way. That way, any bugs that come up in the console version should be the same ones that appear on the PC version and vice versa, instead of them being independent instances. And since Hobo Games loves to keep PC updated and bugless, by default, consoles should get the same privilege. Now, in practice, maybe that won't happen perfectly, but in theory, this should alleviate a lot of the bug problems console had, as it being in sync with PC means that any bugs or issues in Risk of Rain 2 are just bugs and issues with Risk of Rain 2, not independent problems specific to certain platforms. That way, Hobo Games can just fix Risk of Rain 2 and not have to fix specific problems in either platform. This not only relieves console of the bug catastrophe it's been going through, but also gives more time to Hobo Games to focus on the PC version of the game, as they don't have to spend as much time focusing on console, and can instead allocate that extra time to new content on PC. Now, considering how bad console got at some points, maybe that extra time is a bit small. But still, everyone wins, both console and PC, and the console update is definitely a very big reason as to why the Survivors of the Void is gonna be wild. And of course, you saw this coming. Another huge reason we are hugely hyped for the Survivors of the Void is the first of the 2 new survivors coming with it, the Railgunner. I mean, come on, Sniper from Risk of Rain 1, but in 3D with unique abilities? Yes, please. I made a whole nother video going into detail about Railgunner and my thoughts on her, so check that out if you want a more in-depth look at my thoughts on the Survivor, but I want to discuss Railgunner here for a bit because she is a big reason for why this DLC is gonna be so good. Railgunner, as I stated previously, is one of the 2 new survivors coming with the Survivors of the Void. She is the spiritual successor to Sniper from the original Risk of Rain, with some new modifications unique to Risk of Rain 2. Modifications that make her, just a little OP. She carries a primary fire that shoots freaking 100% damage homing missiles, a secondary that turns that missile launcher into a 1000% damage railgun with a scope that auto-crits on weak spots with an active reload that grants a 500% damage bonus on a correct reload, a passive that converts all critical chance into critical damage, concussive bombs, and a literal, actual, on-command nuke. She's nuts. She is just such a nice breath of fresh air for the survivor cast of Risk of Rain 2. She's just so unique, in that she's a long-range, single-target focused burst damage survivor, something we haven't really seen melded together into a survivor as of yet, and definitely a style that is as unique as it is awesome. While there are survivors like Artificer that have that burst damage aspect, and survivors like Huntress that have some long-range capability, Railgunner's playstyle is an awesome mesh of these concepts into one singular survivor. Just seeing from the demo gameplay, she plays so uniquely compared to the existing cast of Risk of Rain 2, and brings a lot of cool new stuff to the table. I expect that she will add a whole new style of gameplay to those who use her, and create a fun experience when combining her with other survivors in multiplayer. She is just such a cool, fun, and awesome survivor, and I can definitely say that I myself am most certainly looking forward to her arrival in the Survivors of the Void. And finally, one of the biggest, wildest things the Survivors of the Void DLC brings with it, something I'm sure everyone is hyped for, one of the main attractions of the whole DLC, is the Simulacrum. This is straight up a whole new game mode thrown on top of Risk of Rain 2, something that we have seen, well, pretty much never before. If you're familiar with the Void Fields, the Simulacrum is kinda similar to that, with a few key differences. But for those who don't know about Void Fields, I'll summarize the Simulacrum real quick. The Simulacrum is a wave-based arena mode set within a massive void simulation. You fight through waves of enemies inside the safe zone, protecting you from the damaging outside void, and attempt to clear as many waves as you can until your inevitable death. As you play, you are granted items upon clearing each wave, and you can also pick up items from chests like in regular Risk of Rain 2, albeit at the risk of traversing into the void. On every 5th wave, the little crab floaty thing will shrink the safe zone and move to a new location, and you can pick up items and such as it travels until it lands and you start another 5 waves, and then rinse and repeat. So again, it's kinda similar to Void Fields, but really expounded upon in its own unique game mode. And I love it. It's just such a cool looking game mode, as we get the, in my opinion, very underutilized Void Fields shown at its true full potential, with void-themed versions of regular Risk of Rain 2 maps, a slew of enemies to fight, new strategies that come with playing a full run in a limited space, etc. It's just so nice to see the Void Fields really fleshed out in this game mode, as I always thought the fields were a great game mode idea, but it was just so short of an experience in the fields. Fighting waves of enemies in an enclosed space really challenges you, as Risk of Rain 2 is all about movement, and spawning a lot of enemies to fight in a small space gives a huge challenge to the player to survive. I mean, that's why the boss fights in Risk of Rain 2 have that enclosed bubble, as limiting space in a game about movement immediately makes the game more difficult, and in this case, it's difficult in a fun way, kinda like how Eclipse is fun to play because of its challenge. Now, the Simulacrum may not be like Eclipse 8, but once you get far enough, it definitely seems like it will get pretty challenging. And since the game only ends with your death, you can just keep challenging the void forever. It is most certainly a highlight of this upcoming DLC, and of course, a big, massive reason as to why Survivors of the Void is gonna be wild. So, to recap, we have Void Fiend, Railgunner, a massive console update, and the Simulacrum, all for just $15. Just let that soak in. Wait, hold on. Also add the plethora of new items and enemies, new maps, and new lore that will come with the DLC as well. Now let that soak in. And wait, also it's $9.75 on release. Now let that soak in. I am confident in saying that Survivors of the Void is the most biggest, massivest, wildest DLC Risk of Rain 2 has ever gotten. And yes, it's only gotten one DLC, that being this one, but still it's wild and it looks so cool. I am very excited to see what the Survivors of the Void holds, and I am just in awe of the work Hobo Games has done to get this out, and I definitely want to shout them out for the great job they did. I am very excited to play this DLC on March 1st, and it just looks so good, and I'm sure you're all excited too, and I just cannot wait. Haha. But, of course, I must ask you, my dear friends, what do you think about Survivors of the Void? Does it really seem as wild as I say? Does it seem better? Worse? What are you most excited for? Please let me know in the comments. Well, I guess now we just wait. come on, just go faster. Just go faster.